Thank you very much. Thank you, John. Every day I always ask how I've stayed married for so long. I've been married for the past 18 years. And when I got married, I thought I would be in there for 5 years maximum. But somehow, this guy has managed to stay by my side. So it's an honor to be among you. I've interacted with most of you, indeed, it's an honor to be speaking to you. You have lots of experience in what you do in international development. So even as I stand here, I also respect and honor that about you, people around in this room. So I'm going to be speaking to you firstly as a Zimbabwean. Secondly, as a very proud woman. I don't like it very much when people call me beautiful. I want to be described as brave. So I'm going to be speaking to you as a brave woman. I'm going to be speaking to you as a human rights activist, a peace activist, an optimist. And also, I think I'm a change agent in the country that I'm working in, Zimbabwe, right there on the ground. I want to believe I'm changing the situation for the next generations which are to come in my country. So the structure of my presentation tonight will be that I'll give you a case study of the political and humanitarian crisis in Zimbabwe. It's been there for the past 7 years, since 2000. And because we are in a transition, we have begun turning things around. But I'm going to give you a background to the humanitarian and political crisis in Zimbabwe. Secondly, I will move on to explain how the opposition and civic society in Zimbabwe contributed to changing the tragic circumstances of the situation in the country. So just explaining how we have been able to do that and why we are where we are now. And I'm also going to be touching a lot on the roles and responsibilities for women and civic society in peace building in Zimbabwe, because that is where we are going now, trying to build a culture of peace for the country. Let's go to the third slide. Okay. Yes, so that is where I am now. So firstly, the background to the situation in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe was colonized by the British government in 1890. So from 1890 up to 1980, we lived under the colonial rule of the British government. And during that time, this government promulgated unfair laws which discriminated the general population and women in particular. There was a deepening of the inequality that was already there in the society by the introduction of Christianity, as I was telling you before, which comes with the male God and his son. And because previously we had the traditional religion, and our God had no sex really at the end of the day. That's what we wanted to believe. So the situation of women grew even worse during the colonial period. And people's land was taken away, the resources were taken away, and the colonial government was really trying to create a situation where people would be forced to go out and work on the farms, on the mines, and in the industries for a very small salary. And the next slide. In 1963, people started a liberation war to get independence from the British. And this was basically a military thing where people took up arms in the neighboring countries and began to fight. And in 1980, we got independence, and we thought we were going to be free as a country. But I guess we didn't then go through the necessary transitions to say what had happened before, what had we all done. The government simply came and took over, and the president proclaimed reconciliation and forgiveness on everyone's behalf. So a process didn't happen. And as soon as 1983, 3 years after we got independence, the government sent an army to a region of the country, and they massacred 20,000 people, including civilians. So it means that culture of violence and inequality we had lived with throughout colonization was continuing to happen. We didn't have the freedom that we thought we had at the end of the day. So that was Gukura. Only 20,000 civilians were killed in one part of the country. We have two regions in Zimbabwe where we speak different languages. So the army was sent in a smaller region which speaks a different language among the Ndebele people, where these 20,000 people were residing. And in 1985, 1990, 1995, 2000, 2005, all those years we had elections. And there was a lot of political violence during those elections. And somehow the ruling party managed to win what they call a landslide victory. They won by a very huge margin at the end of the day. So other violence that happened during our independence era, when we thought we were free, where that the government strengthened what they called the Access to Information and Protection of Privacy Act. When you hear this law, you'd think this is something good, this is something freeing, but actually it was a law which prevented journalists and media houses from working. You would need permission from what they call a Media Commission of Zimbabwe to publish a newspaper, to open a radio station, to cover special news. So as we went along, freedom was actually shrinking in the country. And they also promulgated what they called the Public Order and Security Act. This was a law that the British government had used to make sure the people didn't organize themselves. And when the new government put back this law, it was actually stronger than it was in the previous era. So the culture of violence, intimidation, and whatever was continuing within the country. And they also carried out what they called Operation Murambatsvina. This is clean up. Murambatsvina is a Shona word which just means clean the trash, clean up. And this was an exercise where housing for about 700,000 people was destroyed to the ground. And this was because the government was afraid that the urban areas would erupt in an uprising because of all the injustice that was happening in the country. So Operation Cleanup left many people homeless, and this was during winter, the winter in my country. And for the women, they carried out what they called Operation Shinyavada. Shinyavada in my language means a very dangerous scorpion. And this was an operation where about 7,000 women were arrested for walking unaccompanied during the evening. 7,000. So if you were a nurse and you were coming from your work in the evening, the police would simply pick you. So as we went along, even during this independence, the injustice was increasing step by step against the ordinary people, against the minorities, against the women. And another operation was also Operation Chipochirorwa, which basically means single woman get married. And women would be picked from the street and simply thrown in prison on the pretension that you were a commercial sex worker. So I think as we went along, even during an independent Zimbabwe, we could see the dictatorship taking roots, sort of victimizing everyone that was in their path. So the culture of violence that I have talked about, one person in my country says a revolution ceases to be won when it begins to eat its own children. So when you think you have made a revolution and it turns around and the same people are killing the population, then you don't have any revolution at all. It ceases to be. So ours stopped to be in 1983 when we started murdering some of the people in the country. And I would say our documented culture of violence was born in 1890 during the colonial period, and it has remained with us as Zimbabweans. The state abuses citizens, and as women, we bear the brunt of this violence at the end of the day because women are easier to attack when you really look at it. And our choices in Zimbabwe have been limited by the fact that the government rigs the elections very effectively.